one, and.
Hi, welcome to Last Week in Local for the week ending November 18th. At least in Western New York, we've had snow on the ground for a week, but I was in Boulder all last week. So sunny, blue skies, and no snow on the ground in Boulder. So anyways,
yeah, Colorado needs some snow.
Mary's here this week. I'm here this week. This is like a reunion.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I've been here every week.
You have been. And I will be missing. I'll be here next week, and then I'll miss a couple. Yes. Heading off to meet my children who are traveling through Europe. I'm going to meet them in Bangkok. My wife and I, the four of us, we're going to take a bike ride from Bangkok down south along the Thai coast. So we'll see how that goes. Should be fun. All right. Well, let me kick off. Expedia and TripAdvisor's stock plunged last week after their earnings announcements, and both of them noted, in Expedia's words, incremental weakness in SEO volumes and a related shift to high-cost marketing channels. TripAdvisor noted some incremental SEO headwinds, i.e. Google's not sending them any traffic. Google is keeping traffic on their site, and they're having to pay for AdWords. Not a big surprise, but it's interesting to see its ripple effects throughout the economy in terms of the stock market. In other sort of very strange news, there was this interesting article at The Verge titled "Why Thousands of Amazon Packages Converge on a Tiny Montana Town," and it talks about the odd world of preppers in Roundup, Montana, who, by virtue of there being so much arbitrage in the small business Amazon world, where people will find a special closeout deal someplace, say Walmart, on some overstock, they'll buy it and then they'll sell it on Amazon. But Amazon has very strict packaging standards. So for one reason or another, mentioned in the article, Roundup has become the center of, or one of these centers of, repackaging of these arbitrage materials for resale on Amazon. You know, when we think about Amazon, we think about this efficient logistics network getting stuff from China to your door, and very rarely do we ever think about this package, going from China to Walmart, being bought by some person who's playing the arbitrage game, shipping it off to Montana, shipping it from Montana to a warehouse someplace before it comes to you. Now, that's not efficient. It's quite bizarre, in fact. But it was a fascinating article if you want to understand how sort of small businesses is taking advantage of algorithmic oddities in pricing. In fact, one person even built a tool to scrape all the other websites, compare them to Amazon prices, so they could find out which things they should be doing arbitrage on.
Well, think of the carbon footprint of that little doohickey that goes from all of those places to Montana, to Amazon, to you. Like, wow.
No, it's pretty crazy. I was just wondering about that the other day. Is just, even if you bought something straight up from Amazon that didn't go through the repackaging process and the prepping process, so that it went from China to Amazon to you, is that more or less efficient than buying from an energy point of view and a consumption point of view than buying something off the showroom floor at Walmart? In one case, you have to drive your car, but shipping is consolidated. In another case, the shipping is isolated and sent out. I'm just wondering which, if either. I mean, I think both are. I think the consumption is the problem, probably not the distribution, but I'd be curious to know that the footprint of it. Okay, so in other interesting internet news, operator of a defunct Orange County chain of drug rehabs centers is indicted for fraud. So this guy worked with two other people who, his name is Yates. He worked with Nicholas White and Jeffrey White, who've already pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud, admitted that their scheme resulted in more than $27 million in losses to Obamacare across the country, includes Connecticut, Arizona, California, Delaware, a number of states. And then one of their partners has recently been brought up on charges. If convicted, he faces a maximum of 20 years. And mail fraud on each count, each conspiracy and mail fraud count, and a maximum of 10 years on healthcare fraud. So significant, potential penalties. And it shows, it puts a monetary value on one vertical at Google, which was widely abused for these guys to pull off this fraud. So I would point out that Google is, even though innocent by virtue of law, guilty by virtue of ethics and lack of action in this particular space. And as you pointed out in the pre-talk, 27 million is a lot of people having signed up for drug treatment. God only knows what kind of treatment they got from these shysters.
Yeah, that's sad. It's sad.
Google expanded the local campaign inventory. Article at Search Engine Land where they note that the branded pins are now available to much smaller chains. And these are the pins that show up in maps. So it means now that your basic navigation, which never was advertised before, will now have branded pins showing up adjacent to your route. So you can see that whatever Starbucks is near you as you drive by this particular location. So it expands Google's advertising reaches into previously unadvertised territory. I think you'll see more and more of this as we go forward in the next couple of years, because local is where Google is expanding their ad world. In a blog, similar Google Maps news in a blog post at Google, they talk about the feature they're adding to Google Maps where they're going to allow individuals to discover new places with help from top local guides. So in major cities, Bangkok, Delhi, London, New York, Osaka, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you will see in your the For You tab on Google Maps, top local guides for those markets. So when I go to Bangkok next month, I will report back on whether these local guides provided any valuable insight or not. But an interesting point in the article was they're now up to 120 million local guides, some of whom are in fact spammy. We'll talk more about that later, but it just points out the success Google has had in engaging people more than once in the user-generated content world of local guides that Google has become so enamored. I've always been enamored with, but particularly enamored with in local.
One thing I could see happening is the top local guides getting absolutely inundated with questions and abandoning their positions.
Is there
having
a way
to hire
for them to
help.
communicate? Like, can you communicate back and forth, Mike, or is it just like a you can see what they recommend kind of article or whatever?
Yeah, at this point it says you can see what they recommend, so I don't know about back and forth communication, but I could envision an era of Google Maps influencers, right, where people actually make money from their, by writing a review of some place and recommending it. I could see how it could easily be turned into an influencer-related thing, which has all sorts of legal and other implications, but I see it as likely happening. David Mim and I wrote an article at Street Fight. I don't know when it was, last Wednesday. My schedule's been screwed up because I've been traveling so much. I looked at, out of the last 8 weeks, I will have been traveling 6 of them. So, kind of crazy travel schedule. But the question we ask, are Google's many broken features a reflection of Google's style? And my answer to that is yes, that Google basically allows for innovation by embracing the idea of small engineering teams building out products. They have a very Darwinian way of then winnowing those products by throwing them into the real world, showing them to 1% of the people, 10% of the searchers, 50% of the searchers, and figure out whether these products in very rudimentary form, so essentially broken, meet the basic needs and definition of the product. And if they do, then they'll push them forward. And at some point, they might actually finish the product and make it fully integrated with GMB or whatever, but that they will release largely broken products to the real world in a very rapid-paced test environment where those products will come and go very quickly. Few of them will stick. And it's sort of how they create, from this chaos internally, products that work in the real world. The problem is small businesses and agencies, we see the real world side of that interface, which, like as I'm going to point out in the case of Google Q&A, is very chaotic. So Google Q&A has been broken, as most people know, for the last 5 weeks. We finally got a public confirmation from Google that there are quote unquote technical issues with displaying the right number of questions. They know what the right number of questions are on the back end. They can't show them on the front end. So sometimes your counts are wrong. Sometimes the numbers are wrong. They've been going up and down. They've been following Barbara's looking at it every day, Barbara Oliver's Q&A, and every 48 hours it shifts. Some days there's 11, some days there's 10, some days there's 7, some days there's 4, some days there's 3, some days there's 5. Today when I looked, there was 7, I think. Yesterday there was 4. So, you wonder, you think of Google as a sophisticated engineering company, which they are, but they sort of embrace brokenness in a way that's just so foreign to most of us.
And
at least in business.
Yeah, and hurtful to some as well. Maybe hurtful is not the right word, but this causes real world problems when they do that.
Yes. Yeah, what for Google is just a data point amongst millions is somebody's livelihood, business, contribution, user-generated content. It's something, and they're real people at the end of it. And I think they're trying to overcome that sort of algorithmic bias in local, but it's just so much institutional pressure to do it the way they've always done it. And to break it, they have to actually, on the last 5 or 10%, they have to put people, which we know Google doesn't like to do. They can't solve it algorithmically. They don't, they figure it's not worth solving. It's sort of weird, right? But so it goes. Local rock star Claire Carrill has signed up to do a webinar with SEM Rush. It's pretty far out. It's February 4th at 1300 hours Eastern Standard Time, 1 p.m. Eastern, basically discussing the idea that Mary and Carrie and I have been working on for the last couple of years, Google as your new homepage, and how to take advantage of the fact that more and more people are stopping at Google to convert. And then finally, an interesting case study from a restaurant group called Muya, which appears to be, I've never heard of them, but a restaurant chain nationally around the United States with roughly 80 or 90 hamburger joints, where they committed to the idea of allowing the servers and encouraging the servers to become the front line of both quality and reviews, so that the servers are invested in the process and every shopper is a potential quote unquote secret shopper. The servers are incentivized to ask for reviews and also incentivized to make sure everything works properly. They noted that in their research, their internal research showed that for every half-star rating increase, restaurant revenue increased between 5 and 10% per half star. So significant, meaning over 80 restaurants. They noted that through this plan, which they had in place since January, they've moved from 4.3 to 4.5 stars, which one presumes is a 3 or 4 or 5% revenue increase, which across 90 restaurants is huge, right? So it's interesting.
Well, at one restaurant, that's huge. The margins are so narrow in food restaurants that 3% increase is pretty decent.
Well, also, a lot of big restaurants or busy restaurants, they have expediters on staff who are trying to be the liaison between the kitchen, the customers, the servers to make sure everything gets out okay. This kind of puts the servers in the position of being their own expediters.
Right, which at a fast casual is typically the case already. It's just very erratic. Right now it's more formalized in this context, a little bit more formalized, right? They said that their actual employee retention went up because they were calling people out, the employees out for awards, both monthly and quarterly, for success in this recognition area.
However, as we said in the pre-talk, if you have this kind of incentive going on for your employees, you need to be paying attention to what they're saying to customers and that it's appropriate. They really need training in how to ask for reviews without saying, please put my name in the review so I get a pat on the head from my boss,
or so I don't get in trouble,
spliff.
using the guilt factor to get the review, or whatever it happens to be. That, the ask is important.
Or asking 10 times during the meal. It's like instead of letting somebody chew, or having a conversation about their name in the review. Absolutely. So with that, over to you, Mayor.
All right. So Moz has published a really good guide on marketing strategy for franchises, a local marketing strategy for franchises. And it's not written by any one person. It just has the Moz name on it. And it's pretty extensive guide. It's got a lot of good information in it. And what really caught my attention was this really true quote. It's much more of a relay race than a marathon. Franchisors and franchisees work collaboratively to build a brand, but no one person has 100% control.
They work collaboratively, except when they don't, which is digital marketing, right?
Right. They can't seem to get this cooperative marketing down. The franchisors tend to blame the home company. The home company seems to blame the individual locations. And sometimes they end up in really contentious relationships. Back in the day, there were so many franchisees building their own websites to compete with the home company that it was almost a job in itself dealing with those types of franchisees. So if you haven't worked with franchisees, or if you have, I recommend you read this. And a couple of the things that Carrie and I have figured out over the years is internal linking is huge for these franchise companies. A lot of times, if you can get that store directory working well for every location, that can have a big impact on rankings. And we've also found that if we ask them to let us test, usually it was either their best locations or their worst locations, test certain things on them, that we could learn things that then could be applied across more locations. And this was a pretty profitable strategy for some of the franchises we worked with. Then Joy wrote an article at Search Engine Land about the Bedlam update and the volatility. And basically she's saying that from the things she looked at in Google Maps pack, so not organic at all, but the Maps pack, that Google seemed to be rewarding relevance more. Now, I know that Mike kind of took a different twist on this.
Well, not a different twist, but one of the things she noted was that in many results she was seeing listings that had categories that weren't directly related, that weren't an exact match for the query. So this is where the relevance of other things, including the website, perhaps taking on greater importance. And I just pointed out that it's not just the website where Google gets relevant signals, it's reviews, it's articles from around the web. And if one possible theory here, hypothesis, would be that they reduced the importance of the primary category by some small amount, would cause these other factors to take on more importance. So like all these things, we still don't really know what's going on. And for every one that goes up, there's one that goes down. And everyone that goes down, there's one that goes up. So it's still quite, I think, a little early to really
it's still
judge
very
this.
bedlamous.
Really, but work on your relevance. I mean, that in any day, at any time, that's good advice.
Across
it is good
all
advice.
The real estate you control, your website, your GMB, your reviews, your Q&A, your posts, your products, your services, all of it, tying together to tell a story.
It would be interesting to see, like, there's a woman who wants Google to add the category for cat sitters, which they don't have. And I explained to her many times that, Google doesn't need to have it as a category because you can do it on the front page and with your internal links and in your reviews and all the other way to get Google to understand what you do. It would be interesting to see in an area like that where Google doesn't have a category directly related, what kind of shifts they saw in that in those listings.
That would be interesting. And then Casey Mraz did an article on how to identify fake law firms, and using his advice is gives you some advice on finding them, and then it, of course, tells you to use the redressal form to fight them. But the advice that he gives here is specifically about law firms, but it's applicable to other spammy types of businesses as well.
And it's relevant now because the change in algorithm, whatever it was, seems to have surfaced spam that has typically been buried and shown it more in the primary pack. So it could imply increased reliance on business name, where there's frequently name spam. But so his point was that you need to be ever vigilant, but now even more so because it seems to be more spam showing up in the pack results.
Well, and, be careful as you do it. I had something very weird happen to me last week when I was doing research on a lawyer that was using poor tactics, fake locations, review incentives, things like that. And he tracked me down based on a screenshot I took that automatically uploaded to my Your Contributions that I did not realize was happening. And my IP address, looking at his website, seeing where I was located, he searched for me, and then he realized that I was connected to another couple of attorneys in his area and started calling everybody, asking them who was reporting him. And so when you're doing this research, if you don't want to get harassed, you need to use the redressal form. Be careful how publicly identifiable you are. Use incognito browsers and VPNs. I'm just saying, it's scary to be stalked like that.
Well, in fact, the redressal form came about because Andy Kuiper, SEO from Calgary, Edmonton, somewhere up there, was being harassed because he publicly in the forums called somebody out and got infinite amount of harassment, threatening emails, fake reviews on his clients, that sort of stuff. So absolutely, you want to be somewhat discreet if you don't want to be harassed.
Right. Then Search Engine Land reported that Google My Business, you're no longer going to get phone support. You're not going to be able to just dial a number and talk to somebody. That may not be a bad thing. But I don't think any of us are getting too much support from Google, and they're now reverting to their callback form, where you have to fill out a form and someone from Google will call you about your issue.
I don't think it's a bad thing, especially if the person that calls me actually knows how the product works. I'm all for it, because a lot of the support you get, the people don't have any clue how it works.
And then lastly for me, I'm surprised Mike didn't mention it, but GatherUp has been acquired by Alpine Software Group that owns Martech, don't they? Isn't that Martech?
So it's ASG Martech is a group of, so ASG is a software holding group with about 20 software companies, and ASG Martech is specifically marketing technology companies, so it's a subgroup of ASG. ASG Martech includes, I think, 8 companies now, including Sife and GatherUp and GradeS and Authority Labs and a few others.
Yes. So I guess the good news is that Mike and Aaron and most of the team at GatherUp are staying on. So we shouldn't see too much ugliness happening, we hope. But my big question is, how is this all going to work? How GatherUp and GradeS are pretty much competitors. How are they going to work together in this new world that they live in?
Like best friends, for Christ's sake. So long ago, GatherUp, even from day one, had embarked on a slightly different path and approach to reviews, right? We've always viewed not the review as not the end goal. That the end goal is the customer experience and the business improvement. So from day one, we baked in NPS, for example, and recently we've built out natural language processing to help parse the content of first-party and third-party reviews to help businesses understand how they might move from a 4.2 to a 4.5. So we take a fundamentally different position on the value of a review in the greater context. We see getting the review as just the tactic, and we see a whole range of strategic things in the arena of management and decision making and customer experience and business improvement that we've been focusing on for the last couple of years. So there's a difference in focus, and two, to some extent a difference in capacity and capability. Our product is designed to work really well with multi-location, whether you're an agency with multi-locations or whether you're a multi-location client. Our product is designed to work really well in that situation. And we've developed a whole series of onboarding processes and stuff around onboarding multi-location clients for agencies, with agencies, as well as multi-location clients directly. So we have a slightly different market focus. We think that both they and we think the market is huge. It's basically what business doesn't want to hear from their customers or get more reviews? Every business. So the world is our oyster as we see it. So there's a lot of room in the marketplace, and there's a lot of sharing that can go on between us and Great Us in terms of knowledge and capabilities, back-end stuff like authorization at various sites, review monitoring, all the sorts of things we have in common. So while we're going to highlight our differences, there are common stuff that allow us to grow faster, be better, and do what we do better. They've been a great company to work with. They've been very respectful of the founders, allowing us to leave or stay, whatever our choice is. There are no golden handcuffs involved in this. I'm choosing to stay. I don't have to stay. And they allowed us to treat our employees really well, and that was important to us. And we're keeping all our teams in place. So it was the fourth leg. I mean, the products are different. They allowed the founders to be who they are. They've treated our employees really well, allowed them to stay, and we're able to, I think, carry forward with our customers the way we have been as a team, which is focusing on them and listening to them. So in that sense, a lot of possibility. It's always a little scary. Change is hard. I've spent 2 months sort of thinking about this and dealing with it and worrying about it. And, in the end, I think if I keep focused on the things that are important, which are the people that have supported us and helped us, then I can't go wrong, right? So, and we'll see. The future is the future. Well, thank you. And just as a note, the congratulations go to an incredible team, right? I mean, Josh and Mike Murphy and Don and Thomas Ash and the original co-founders as well. I mean, our support team started out volunteering for us. It sounded like Google, 5 years ago. I mean, they just wanted to learn the product. So they started doing support, and they became our customer success team, the core of our customer success team. How would we have done this without them? We wouldn't have. So it's really a reflection of everybody pulling on the oars.
Great.
Nice.
Now it's time for you, Carrie.
It's my turn?
Yes.
It's my turn. I found an article that's a little bit older. It's from August. Eric Enga wrote it over at Proficient Digital, but it was kind of timely for me. He talks about the overuse of the blog post as a way to share content versus creating pages on your website. Like, when should it be a blog post and when should it be content in a hub with light content around it? And it was interesting. They looked at like 100 randomly selected blogs and found that like 70% of the pages in the blogs weren't really even blog posts, like they shouldn't have been blog posts. And then they found that 2/3 of the blog posts that they looked at had a link depth of 5+, meaning it was 5 clicks from the homepage to that content. So yeah, a blog post can rank for longer tail terms, and they might be landing pages in some cases. But it's also, if it's really, well done, valuable content, why not make it easily accessible for people who get to your website a different way? So, is it best to have it in a blog? And, Mary mentioned in the pre-talk, we've been telling a couple of our clients, you need to stop blogging and start actually building pages on your website that talk about the things you do and where you do them. I think that people have gotten the message that you need to blog, you need to blog, you need to blog. And so they just put their head down and started blogging. And now they've got, hundreds of blog posts that are repetitive. They're, it's old stuff that doesn't matter anymore. Do you keep it? Do you prune it? Do you clean it up? Do you combine it with some other stuff? I think that people need to take a really close look at their blogs and their blogging strategy and try and decide if that's where they should be going and how they should be proceeding. I have 2 clients I put a moratorium on. I told them you can't blog until you do A, B, and C of these other things, some of which is clean up repetitive stuff. You'll find that businesses that have blogged for a long time have blogged about the same topics multiple times. Like, if it's news and it's something new in that niche or category industry, I think it's worth a blog post. But if it's you're just talking about hot water heaters, that's not a blog post. Like, I think there are reasons to and reasons not to. So I thought it was an interesting article. It's definitely worth a look. And it's also something to kind of keep in your hip pocket when you need a little bit of extra oomph to help you convince people that maybe blogging is not the best thing for them at this point in time. Like I said, I put a moratorium on it. I didn't get rid of the blog. I just said, hey, let's stop this for a while and do something else.
Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of people that don't put together the history of the growth of WordPress and of blogging. And that when WordPress first came out, there were a lot of SEO benefits to blogging that don't exist anymore. Mm-hmm. So a lot of that, you got to blog advice is no longer accurate.
Right.
Well, and it never was totally accurate. I mean, good content is always important. Blogging has always only been important for some subset of businesses that could leverage it, right?
Right.
I mean, for me and you, and it has been a life changer, but we have national audiences that are interested in topical news, but you're right, it's not right for everybody, and it shouldn't be a tactic, it should be a strategy. Just like many of the things we talk about, that you have to assess its value in the context of the business. And if it's good content, great. But like Carrie said, if it's not newsworthy or regular, you're trying to develop regular readership, then build it into your regular content.
Mm-hmm. And to kind of tie in with what Mike was talking about Google Maps and being able to follow or to see what local guides recommend in a specific area, there's 2 new features that have been added to Google Maps. Now you can report, as a user, you can report other users on Google Maps if they're doing spammy things like leaving nonsensical questions or answers to questions or weird spammy reviews or things like that. You can report them. And you can also follow local guides. So Mike could actually go follow those local guides that have recommendations while he's in Bangkok to have it surface. I'm assuming it would surface faster or easier if you're following them within the Maps app.
Yeah, I don't know if it's geo-surfaced. In other words, if I get close to something, or whether it's activity surfaced, i.e. they've posted something new. I'm not sure, but they note that as part of this announcement, that their recommendations will be surfaced to you in Google Maps, so you can get inspired with ideas of things to do and places to go.
Interesting. Mary mentioned in the pre-talk that this is just another instance of Google asking us to report all their spam for them because they can't figure it out on their own, which is pretty typical, right? Let us do your job for you for free. Allie over at White Spark wrote a really good article about getting your Google My Business holiday ready, which I think is something everybody should be paying attention to right now. I am still nagging 2 of my clients for their holiday hours. I don't know what's so difficult about it, but making sure that you're saying, if you're open longer than you normally are. I know businesses that are open for extended hours leading up to the holiday. And so make sure that's in your Google My Business, or if you're closed on specific days, make sure that's in your Google My Business. And there's some other tips in there for making sure that you're ready for the holiday season. Also, Crystal Tang of Rio SEO posted in the local search forum about a fix for irrelevant events showing up on your Google business listing, which I think is super helpful. We've seen some instances in the past year or so where completely irrelevant or bad events are showing up right in that local knowledge panel for a business. I know Tim Camper highlighted how there were some weird events showing up for 10 Downing Street, where the Prime Minister lives in London, that were irrelevant, gobbledygook, I think, in a few cases. And so now there's a mechanism for reporting those to Google for removal. Crystal outlines how you should do it in this post in the local search forum. And the last thing I have is my new favorite tool, also Asked, has added a CSV export option, which makes it that much more useful for me. I will note that it gathers results from UK only, but I still find it highly useful for US-based content creation, FAQ writing, optimization of content, etc. You just have to make sure, as Mike pointed out, that the language is one-to-one, because some of the things they say over there, we don't say here, and vice versa. So
true that.
That's what I got.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us for Last Week in Local. And we hope to hear you next week. Join us again. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks. Bye, Mike. Bye, Carrie.